So our focus for today is going to be I can estimate products by using rounding and compatible numbers. So we first looked at rounding and compatible numbers with adding and subtracting decimals, and today we're going to take a look at it when we are multiplying whole number products. So at the top of page 120, it says, how can you estimate products? And the problem is a store needs at least $15,000 in sale per month to make a profit. The store is open every day in March and sales average $525 per day. Will the store make a profit in March? And then the question is the sales total for March at least 15,000? Well, we have to look at how many days are in March. So the number of days that are in March are going to be 31. The question that I have is this going to be around 15,000? So our goal is to get this around 15,000. So what we need to do is we need to multiply to do this. Well, we've not learned at this point how to do 2-digit by 3-digit multiplication. And it is helpful to have my estimation done first, because then it allows me to see, is my answer reasonable or not reasonable? So that's why we're working on our estimation skills for today. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use rounding. And here, to make it easy, I'm going to round to the nearest hundredth. So when I have a 3-digit number, I want to make it as easy as possible to multiply. So I'm probably going to round to the nearest hundredth. And then when I have a 2-digit number, I'm going to round to the nearest tenth. So when I do that, 525 becomes 500 because 25 is less than 50. So I'm going to round down. And I'm going to multiply that by 31. Well, I need to round this first. So I'm going to round down because 1 is going to be less than 5. So I'm going to multiply that by 30. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to multiply my 5 and my 3. So my 5 and my 3 is going to be 15. And then I'm going to use my multiple of 10 rule. My multiple of 10 rule says that the number of zeros that I have up here in my products needs to match the number of zeros that I have down here, unless I make a 0 when I'm multiplying. So I didn't make a 0, right? My second digit is not a 0. So I need to make sure that my problem has 1, 2, 3 zeros after it. So I have 1, 2, 3 zeros. So I have 15,000. So the question goes back to, did they make enough profit in March? Well, they needed to make at least 15,000, and the estimate is 15,000. But here's the thing about the estimate. The estimate is actually an underestimate. So I underestimated, and I ran out of room. I underestimated what the sales were going to be because I rounded both numbers down. So I want my estimate to be an underestimate. I want to make sure that I'm going to make sales. So by rounding both numbers down, that means I'm going to make more than $15,000. So I will have made sales for the month of March. Okay. So let's take a look at the convince me. It says a different store needs to make at least $20,000 profit in March. So I'm doing $20,000 in profit in March, where they average $685 a day. And they are it's going to be, month of March is 31 days. Okay, so James used rounding estimation, said 685 is almost 700. And 731 is going to be round to 30. And so 700 times 30 is going to be 21. And then I have 1, 2, 3 zeros. So 21,000. Did they make sales? So do we agree with James or do we not agree with James? Well, I'm going to agree with James, even though we overestimated, right? As I rounded up here and I rounded down here. Well, the amount that I rounded up is greater than the amount I rounded down. So here I rounded up by 15. Here I rounded down by 1. So because what I rounded up is greater, I'm going to have an overestimate. And in this case, I think it's going to be okay that we overestimated because it's going to be close. If I did 685 and I rounded that down to 600, they wouldn't have made sales, but they're closer to 700. So his answer is reasonable. So really, it's not just also about being able to estimate, but it's also, can you identify when you need to overestimate or underestimate? Okay, so we have now estimated products by looking at rounding. Let's take a look at compatible numbers. So I have 24 multiplied by 398. Okay, I don't want to round 24 down. I want to find a compatible number. So I'm going to find a number that's near 24 that's going to be easy to multiply. Well, 25 is a number that's easy to multiply because when I think of 25, I think of quarters. And then this is going to be near 400. So even if I rounded this number, 400 is still a compatible number. So I rounded, it works both as a rounded number and a compatible number. But I didn't round this down to 20 because I want to get a close estimate. So in this case, the compatible number is going to help me get to a close estimate. So 25 is compatible to 24. Now, multiple of 10 rule says I can ignore these zeros and just multiply 4 and 25. So if I have 4 quarters, I have how much money? I have 100. Okay. And then I have to add on my 2 zeros that I ignored. I have to put them back on over in my product. So I have 10,000 is my estimate. If I had done 20 times 400, my estimate would have been 8,000. 8,000 is going to be too low of an estimate because of how much I had to round down. Look at the difference between using a compatible number and rounding with this. It's a huge difference. So the closer you can get to the actual answer, the better off you're going to be. So sometimes compatible numbers are going to help you get closer to the answer. Okay, let's take a look at your guided practice. It says each egg carton holds 1 dozen eggs. Michael's chicken farm fills 121 egg cartons. So I'm going to write that down because I think that's important. He thinks that there were over 1,500 eggs. Okay, is he correct? So I'm looking for 1,500 eggs. I need to find the other product or the other factor that I need to multiply 121 by. So I'm going to go back into that problem and dig a little bit. It says each carton holds 1 dozen eggs. There's my other number. 1 dozen is equal to 12. Okay, so I'm going to use an estimate, and the estimate that I'm going to use is I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to use rounding. I'm not going to look for a compatible number because I don't have one, right? 12 is close to 10, 121. I'm going to go ahead and actually, because I'm rounding by 10 here, I'm going to make this one not 100, but 120. So I always look for the easiest way to estimate. So I want to try and get both numbers to be a 0. And this one, it was easy to be a 0. And 12 is easy to multiply by 1. So if it's a math fact that I know, I can go ahead and round to the tens place value in the hundreds. Only if it's a math fact I know. If it's not a math fact I know, you're better off rounding to the nearest 100. So again, I ignore my zeros, right? In fact, I'm just going to put my zeros over here. So 1, 2, great. I've taken care of my zeros. I've moved them over using that multiple of 10 rule. So I can manipulate my zeros by taking them off here and putting them off over here for my product. 12 times 1 is going to be 12. Okay? So is he going to have a reasonable estimate? Nope, it's not reasonable. Look at how far apart these estimates are. So I have 1,500 and I have 1,200. Not a reasonable estimate. So here I used rounding. Let's see if I can do this using compatible numbers. So I'm going to go back and I'm going to do 121 times 12. So I'm going to look for a math fact of my 12s that I can use. So here I have 12. Here I have 12. So what if I left the 12 alone and rounded this to 120? So what if this became 120 times 12? So if I did 120 times 12, again, I can take off that 0, put it over on my product side, and now I have 12 times 12. Well, 12 times 12 is 144. So I have 1,440 eggs. It's a closer estimate, but it's still under what he estimated. So he is not correct. Look at some of what you guys have done, or we'll take a look at number 2. So problem number 2, I have 29 multiplied by 688. So the big thing to remember that when you're estimating products by using rounding and compatible numbers is there's a lot of gray. There's not necessarily one right answer. You just need to be able to justify why you did what you did. So here, I'm going to take a look. I have 29. That's not a number that I know how to multiply by very easily, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to round it. I'm going to round that to 30. Well, if I want to look for compatible numbers, I look here and I want to say, okay, what's a number that's going to be near 3 that's going to be easy, or near 30 is going to be easy to multiply? I don't really see anything. That's not math facts that I'm familiar with. So I'm comfortable going ahead and rounding this to 30 times 700. Now, I'm going to take off my zeros. So I have 1, 2, 3, and I'm going to move those zeros over to my product side. Again, that multiple of 10 rule allows me that flexibility. As long as I move them over to my product, I'm totally fine doing that. And then it becomes a very easy problem to multiply. 3 times 7. So I have 21,000. So my estimate here is 21,000. Notice I showed my thinking. I showed what I am estimating. So I have 21,000. And now I need to decide if it's going to be an overestimate and underestimate. Well, here I rounded up. And here I rounded up. Very clear that this is going to be an overestimate. Okay, let's take a look at your 210 times 733. So again, I'm going to first look for compatible numbers because sometimes compatible numbers are going to get me much closer than the rounding. So 210, I might be able to leave 210 alone. But if I come over here and I look at 733, if I round this to 700, so I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to round this down. So I round this to 700. I don't know what 21 times 7 is. And the whole point of estimation is to make this as easy as I can. So I want to be able to do this mentally. And I don't know what 21 times 7 is. So I'm going to make it easy. And I'm just going to round this 210 down to 200. Now it's a very easy number. So I'm using my basic facts. So I'm really multiplying 2 times 7. So again, the multiple of 10 rule says I can manipulate zeros. If I have zeros on this side, I can take them away as long as I move them over to the product. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4 zeros. So my final product needs to have 4 extra zeros. So it's just 2 times 7, which is 14. And then I add 1, 2, 3, 4. So my answer is 140,000. Now I have to determine if this is an overestimate or an underestimate. So I have 210, and I rounded down to 200. 733, I rounded down to 700. So because I rounded both values down, it's an underestimate. All right, let's take a look at your one. I'm going to finish up problems 4 and 5 in the second video. So when you are at this point, you need to go ahead and move into the second video.